Welcome, friends. Here we are. I'm Dr. Malia Jones, editor-in-chief at Dear Pandemic, and I'm joined this morning by Dr. Lindsay Leininger, who is our nerdy-in-chief at Dear Pandemic, and we're here to tackle your thorny COVID questions. As always, I want to start off by thanking our readers for submitting all of your great questions in the question box. We, as you know, are big nerds, and that means we like to do our homework. So we don't take questions cold out of the chat window. If you have a question, you need to submit it in the question box. And I will repeat that about halfway through this week because somebody last week commented that they tuned in like halfway through and missed that note. So how are you this morning, Lindsay?
I'm okay. I'm tired. I'm feeling a little low energy, but I'm happy to be here. How about you?
Yeah, it's been a big week. We were just chatting before we went live that it's been kind of an overwhelming week in terms of COVID news because there's a lot going on. So I think we're both tired. We've both been doing a lot of media this week.
It's been a busy week at the information front lines.
It has indeed, yeah.
But I'm happy to see you. And we ended up being matchy twins without
planning.
So
with our Dear Pandemic t-shirts on.
And our glasses.
So if you have a question, I'm just going to repeat this because I forgot to say one important part of it. You can put it in this question box, which is at our website, dearpandemic.org. And while you're there, you should go ahead and search for your question because a lot of the questions that we got this week are repeats of things that we have already answered. So check that out. And meanwhile, Lindsay, big news this week from Pfizer. We need an update on vaccine news.
The vaccine news is happy. And that's not just because I am our resident happy, optimist, nerdy girl. There are some hard-hearted, crusty veteran scientists who agree with me on this. So here's the scoop. We had a readout this week of the pre-approved sneak peek of the data of the Pfizer vaccine trial. And this initial readout suggests that the vaccine might actually work way better than the scientific establishment was hoping for, with no evidence of serious safety concerns to date in the trial. I'm going to read a quote from Dr. Fauci because it really lands with me. So this is Fauci's reaction to the news. Help is coming, and it's coming soon. So what's next? Next is a waiting game, unfortunately. Soon does not mean tomorrow. Soon does not mean even the end of this calendar year. Soon means over 2021, most likely. There's a lot that's going to have to happen between this initial readout of 96 infection events is basically what this boils down to. 2 shots in the arms of hundreds of millions of Americans. But the reason why the scientists are so hopeful is because we are learning that we are hitting the right target with the science for the vaccines. And that as proof of context is everything.
Yeah.
Proof of concept, excuse me, is everything. And I will note, Malia, just personally, there have been a lot of moments in this pandemic that I'm pretty sure I will take with me in my memory. But one of them that will probably be at the top of the list was where I was when I read the headline about that 90% efficacy news for this trial. I was in my kitchen. I was getting my cup of coffee. My husband was taking the kids to school. I read the readout and I gasped because of the proof of concept that it provided, and I started crying. And I'm not a crier. So this is big news.
It is big news. So just, can you clarify a little bit what this means when you say 96 infection events? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I was not intending to get into the actual arithmetic, so I'm actually a little upset that I even let this one slip, but Malia, I can't help myself because I am a data geek. So what this means is that when clinical trials, they enrolled over 40,000 people for this clinical trial, but the way that statisticians count time actually isn't calendar time, it's event time. And the event in these trials are actually catching SARS-CoV infection. So what they were looking for in order to take this pre-approved sneak peek, blessed by the FDA, was they needed to have enough people in this trial who became infected in order to do a readout of the data.
And
We
that's
don't
in
need to
both
go into
arms.
statistical
So
power. It was
that,
yeah, but we don't, Emily. I actually really don't want to go into this
yeah,
because
no, the point I just want to highlight is that's across both the placebo group and the group that got the actual
that's
vaccine.
right.
Yeah.
But I, putting into context whether that's a lot or a few events, actually people have kind of different takes on this. But what I've done is for people who like the math and like the arithmetic, there's a really good explainer in the comments. It's this box breakdown, and it's going to go into exactly where Malia was talking about. It's going to talk about the events and the trial arms and like all the good data stuff that, we love. But I kind of want to leave this answer with like, this is hopeful because this really shows that science is hitting the target.
Yeah. Yeah. And specifically that, that the part of the immune system and the match between the immune system function and the virus itself is a good match. That we, when you say hitting the target, it's almost literally we are targeting the right part of the virus with the vaccines in development so far. So that's really good news.
Just the bench, the innovators at the bench, right? The scientists.
Yeah. So for me, 90% efficacy is really super exciting because I study herd immunity, and the higher your vaccine efficacy is, the less people who get the vaccine will have vaccine failure, and the easier it is to get to herd immunity. So it's also really exciting on that front.
Well, it's sure fun to start out the morning with some good news.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I get to ask you a question now, and
Yeah.
it's a little, I wouldn't say it's bad news, but it's a little more about viral transmission, which, sadly is the reality that we're going to be living with for a while.
Yeah.
Vaccine news nonetheless. So we have a question from Gina from New Jersey. Thanks for writing, Gina. Is there a breakdown of where people are getting infected? What percent of exposure happens at school, work, grocery shopping, restaurants, family gatherings?
Yeah. So, as far as I could find, looking for an answer to this question, Gina, there has not yet been a thorough review, a summary review that would tell us the percent like you're asking for here, in terms of the results of contact tracing and the context in which people are getting infected. But I will say that my own county health department has a really great communications team, and they have been sharing what they've learned from contact tracing as just bullet points. Here's what's going on. Here's what we're hearing in our contact tracing interviews. And CDC has also released a number of key points in terms of what are the highest risk kinds of contacts that they have gathered from, reviewing contact tracing across lots of different contexts. So what we know so far is that the very high risk activities for, the kinds of contexts where people are getting sick are things like bars and nightclubs, gyms, indoor sports. For example, ice hockey made big news recently. Sorry, Lindsay, I know your kids play ice hockey. Indoor group dining, such as in restaurants or indoor, like dinner parties, private parties, extended family meals. We see people getting sick at family gatherings, small parties that are happening indoors. Game nights made the news this week as one of the primary drivers of transmission recently. Also, there have been a lot of super spreader events where a lot of people got sick in a large group context, like at weddings, funerals, summer camps, church choirs and choir practices. And then the other really high risk context that we see is living in group settings, like at a prison, a nursing home, or dormitory. Also, sharing house with someone who has COVID-19 is a high risk setting. And then finally, in terms of workplace, working in a healthcare setting is, of course, very high risk for transmission of COVID-19. So, what do these high risk situations have in common? If we want to look and, kind of get some broad takeaways here, what we see is that across all these settings, we have people who are together for more than a few minutes. They're often indoors, almost always indoors, in fact. Often they're in situations where people are not wearing masks or they're taking their mask on and off frequently. they always involve people coming together from multiple households, right? That is almost a necessary condition for high transmission risk. And then they also often involve certain activities that would involve expelling more droplets than usual, like eating or drinking, shouting, singing loudly, such as at a nightclub or choir practice, dancing or exercising. And I think that's why, I was reading the CDC article that we're going to drop in the links, and I was really struck by how closely it aligns to the SMART guidelines that we came up with at Dear Pandemic many months ago. And that's why our SMART guidelines include wearing masks, air, right? Having a well ventilated space or being outdoors, restrict. That means don't come together with people outside of your own household bubble when possible, and then time. So the duration of exposure is another important factor. The less risky activities that we're seeing, we don't see a lot of transmission happening in quick shopping trips, like at the grocery store, or quick trips to the hardware store, that kind of thing. Getting the mail, attending a typical doctor's visit to have your blood pressure checked or have a mammogram or whatever your typical physician or clinician visit is. Outdoor activities like going to the playground, having an outdoor play date, having some kind of small outdoor gathering, like gathering around a bonfire with physical distance in between people. And then, some desk work environments and school environments where people are indoors, but they're wearing masks and they're not engaged in things like singing and loud talking. Those so far seem to be lower risk environments. So, some of the high risk, the thing I want to close with here is this: some of these high risk situations are things that people have no control over. If you're in a nursing home or you're in prison, you don't have any choice in who you're sharing a room with. And that's why public health really is a community effort, right? It's really not all about you, and it's not all about me and our individual risk profile and our individual risk activities. So the goal, the aim, is to reduce the rate of disease in the whole community overall in order to help shield people who don't really have any control over the kind of risk environment that they are in. And right now we're seeing really sad news about especially healthcare workers who are in, really dire work situations because hospitals are overwhelmed and they're burning out, and they're also at incredibly high risk of exposure to COVID-19 in the workplace because of how much disease is circulating. So, our goal is to reduce the rate of disease overall. And this just doesn't work as an individual project. It only works when we all commit to this community goal of reducing the overall rate of transmission, the overall rate of disease circulating. I think that kind of individual, what is my personal risk thinking, is actually what's led to, Wisconsin right now is a complete flipping disaster. And I think a big part of what's led to that is this kind of individualistic, risk-driven thinking. We have not been paying attention to community level issues. So that's my rant about it's a community effort and it's not all about you or me.
I have two short reactions to offer to your very good rant. So the first is a shout out to our partners at Impact for Healthcare. They also have teamed up on our SMART protocol. So just want to give them the propers their due. And the second thing I want to say is when I heard you read through that checklist, like especially the top parts, it was like a sucker punch because we've been talking so much about the holidays, and I know we'll come back to that, but it's like all the settings that sustain us emotionally and spiritually also spread the virus.
Yeah, I know. And that's, we've also talked this week about pandemic fatigue. That's part of what the challenge is right now, is that we're tired of this. I want to see my friends. I want to engage in some of these things that I really value, like game night. I love game night. I'm really tired of Zoom game night. But we saw a notice from the CDC this week that game nights are currently one of the main ways the disease is spreading. So it's just, we have to adapt. What's your like top level takeaway from that great post about pandemic fatigue, managing pandemic fatigue this week? Did you
Take
have
care of
one?
yourself, find your purpose.
Yeah.
Find a purpose, right? And like for you and for me, it's this. For others, it's waking up every morning and walking your sick neighbor's dog.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. I mean, that's evidence-based.
Yep.
Dr. Christine Whelan, your colleague at University of Wisconsin-Madison, writes about this, and that is one good evidence-based tip to kind of keep working through.
One of the things that struck me about this past week's post about pandemic fatigue was is to try and keep your thinking short term. I mean, we are here for the long term, but it's really important to think about like, what am I going to do today to take care of myself? Do I need to get to bed early? Do I need to get out in the sun and go for a short walk? Or maybe even a long walk, depending on how things are going.
Right.
So thinking about those like immediate, taking care of our immediate needs while we try to endure this, what is going to be a long haul until a vaccine becomes available. All right, so I've got a question for you, Lindsay. Are you ready for one?
I'm ready.
Okay, we have Kay from Maryland who asks, I'm newly pregnant and freaking out about the rising numbers. Can you explain the risk for a pregnant woman versus non-pregnant women? Does it differ by trimester? What do you recommend as safety procedures? And if you have another child, should they continue to go to their small in-home daycare?
So thank you for writing in. And the first thing I want to say is congratulations. Really happy for you. It's a special time. And again, even the science communicators who are rough and tumble, like Dr. Michael Osterholm, when he talks about pregnancy and staying safe during pregnancy during the pandemic, he is a huge softie. So congratulations. I am similarly a softie about this. That's wonderful news. And it sounds like you're working with some understandable confusion about where the best place to get the information is. There's a lot of the backdrop of being pregnant, period, much less against the backdrop of being a pandemic. So as always, I will stress that we don't give medical advice, right? We just give informational advice, if you will. So what I'd like to do is just kind of point you in a good direction to maybe help avoid pregnancy-related doom scrolling and instead sort of point your Google searching towards potentially more productive and helpful places. I don't want to, overgeneralize from my experience, but I know that I did a whole lot of Googling when I was pregnant. So that's my hope, is to
And
give
it's
you.
not always super helpful.
And it's not always super helpful. Right?
There's a limit to how helpful Googling is.
And it is quickly reached, right? Like right. The diminishing returns. So that's why I'm going to try to point you towards some good sources with my answer. So the headline about the evidence to date around pregnancy and COVID is that the news overall is quite good. Many women have had successful pregnancies, healthy deliveries, healthy babies throughout the entirety of this pandemic. So I think it's good to sort of start with that headline. We are learning as the science emerges that there is some evidence suggesting that there is a slightly elevated risk for a poor, more serious symptom, I will put it this way, for pregnant women who become infected. Now, again, I think the really important thing to keep in mind here is that serious symptoms of COVID remain very rare, even among pregnant women. So while they are considered a vulnerable population by the CDC and other places, I think it's really just important to know that while caution is warranted and perhaps a little extra caution, it is absolutely, fear is not warranted, which is the happy news. So where should you get your information? Well, always your clinician, right? They know you, they're treating you as a whole person, whether it be your midwife or your OBGYN. They're just gonna have the best spidey sense, especially with respect to questions such as, what about my child? Should I keep sending them to daycare, right? Like I don't make a presumption that I know enough about the context of your life to have any sort of informed advice on that. So that's the sort of thing that your clinician is gonna be great with. So that's sort of like leg number one and probably the strongest leg of your information triangle. So the second leg that I like to lean on, and I'm actually a teacher of evidence-based medicine, so this is totally my wheelhouse, are medical societies. In this case, it's ACOG, the American College of Obstetrician and Gynecologists. That is what your doctor or your other clinician, if for the Midwives Association, that's what they're reading and that's what they're getting their information from. So you can go to their website and you can go into a rabbit hole of information there that is good, it's credible, it's vetted. And ACOG, like a lot of medical societies, also put out a lot of patient education materials. So you can
I think
spend a lot
that
of time.
fact that we're dropping the links, that fact is really, really good. It has specific answers to a lot of these questions.
So many
What
questions.
are the risks? Who should I call?
And the other thing is that I want to really point out, medical societies, you should stick with them because the evidence is emerging and changing quickly and they are updating quickly. Whereas some of the health systems that I went and I tried to look for links to give you, their information is good, but it's dated often. So in a context with really shifting science, I really like to point people toward medical societies. The other place, and this is for the hardcore nerds, and many among you will be like, oh, please stop it. But some among you will want this. And Kay, if you are one of the people who wants this, I really like aggregations of the evidence that are up to date and comprehensive. And there is actually a site called Up to Date that provides the best, the most comprehensive reviews of all the evidence. So we'll drop that link too. That's for my fellow hardcore nerds. But one last thing I want to say about information and seeking information and social support while pregnant, especially against the backdrop of a pandemic. It's good to find support and connection in online communities that are happy and good online communities, because there's some shadow sides too. And I cannot recommend more strongly our partners, Bump Club and Beyond. So Bump Club and Beyond is a community. I think they're up to 115,000 followers on Facebook. I don't know, I haven't looked for a while, but it's all about pushing out good information, some fun products, getting social support around pregnancy, delivery, and parenting in general. And the reason why I'm so excited to scream this to the world is because their founder, also named Lindsay, is 100% committed to getting good medical and scientific information on that site throughout the pandemic. And I'll give you an example. Up next week, our partners Impact for Healthcare, who I talked about earlier, are doing an upcoming labor and delivery panel. They're all physicians, they're all moms, on Bump Club and Beyond. So you can go and get all sorts of fun things about like baby bottles and blankets to buy. But Lindsay, the owner and the founder of this amazing community, is a diehard nerd herself. So.
Yeah. And I think that's really valuable. I mean, I find a lot of the parenting sites to be, there's a balance between, positive parenting and, good science-driven information. And somewhere in there, it's just really easy to end up in the universe of woo. And I think, for some people that works really well, but for COVID information, it does not work well. And so I think they do a great job of striking a balance between the science without going too far into the numbers and being too detailed on it, and also pretty much woo free. So
I love that. Well, Leah, you've made my morning with that. I gotta tell you. You are just so great. Okay, so is it my turn to ask you our final question?
It is, yeah. Oh wait, but before you do, I saw a couple people who posted questions in the comments. We don't take questions live during the show because we're too nerdy for that. We like to do our homework. So if you have a question, go to our website. It's dearpandemic.org and put it in the question box. We read those every week, every single one of them, and we use it to inform our upcoming topics and also the questions we take for next week's show. So go there.
Yeah, and thanks for your patience with this.
Yes.
We need to study, and we know that not all Facebook Q&As have that same norm, but we are study nerds.
We are. I mean, it's the top line of our mission is we're committed to facts, and so we like to look things up. So
okay, so can I ask you a final question?
Yes, please do.
Okay, I'm so excited to ask you this one. So several readers have asked us, how can we safely celebrate Thanksgiving?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the nerdy girls the past week here since Halloween have felt like it's been our main job to ruin Thanksgiving. We have gotten so many Thanksgiving questions, and the reason for that is because the characteristics of traditional Thanksgiving as well as many other winter holidays. You know, we can look at Christmas and New Year's parties and Diwali and, you know, not lots of the winter holidays. What we do is we go gather with our extended family across many different germospheres, putting them all together for a meal that lasts several hours and involves everybody sitting down at a table together and eating without masks on, right? This is like, I heard one scientist in the news, I think it was last week, say this is like a Children's Illustrated Guide to Super Spreading. It's a really high risk activity, right? So how do we celebrate Thanksgiving safely? Okay, so I think one thing that's really helpful here is to sit down and really ask ourselves, what is important about this holiday to us personally and us as a family? It might even be helpful to sit down with a piece of paper and write down what you think is important to you about Thanksgiving. For me, what's important about Thanksgiving is the spirit of gratitude, and we can have the spirit of gratitude without gathering at all. We can be alone and celebrate gratitude, right? There are some terrific gratitude meditations out there on the internet that you could Google. We as a family will not be getting together with anyone outside of our normal bubble this year for a big feast. In fact, I'm going to spend some time being grateful for some of the things that I don't like about Thanksgiving. I find that traditional Thanksgiving has a lot of nonsense baked in that I really don't enjoy, like Eurocentrism and traditional gender roles. And I'm really happy to not be dealing with that this year. So that's what I'm grateful for. My kids are also working on some kind of surprise Secret Santa type gratitude message situation to share with our neighbors. Don't tell them, who I'm sure are all listening anyway. But they're coming up with some kind of gratitude messaging to leave on people's doors or something like that. You know, for my husband, what's important about Thanksgiving, honestly, it's the pie. And specifically, it's my homemade pumpkin pie. So I'm going to make a pie. That's what we're going to do to celebrate Thanksgiving. We got some other good ideas and questions from readers on this topic. So Lori from Fort Worth, Texas asks, can you imagine an outdoor Thanksgiving gathering? If we sit 8 feet between families and gather around a fire pit and share coffee and pie for 2 hours, would you consider that low risk? Happily, yes, I would consider that low risk. You're outside. You won't be able to wear a mask while you're eating pie, but you will be able to have space between families. And, you know, I think it would be really lovely to get together outside and share coffee and pie. In Texas, hopefully it'll be warm enough to do that. Here in Wisconsin, if it's warm enough, we might have driveway pie with some other folks.
I am in the AP Newswire committed to driveway pie. My driveway pie plans have gone viral, so
Tell me about what are your driveway pie plans? What does this look like?
Well, so Malia, you know, like you, I'm trying to center in what matters, and it's family, it's friends, and it's carbs. So I'm going to Zoom with my parents, with the rest of my family members. I am going to do driveway pie with my friends who live down the street, who invited us over to pie last year. We had a lovely time. So I wanted to invite them this year. And so we will stand and we will be freezing, flipping cold. And we will stand 10 feet apart or more as long as we can stand it. And we'll at least have this tradition of sharing pie together for Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
And then carbs is like that plan's still on. Like nothing changed there.
Yeah, you don't actually need to invite anyone else to enjoy the carbs of Thanksgiving, do you?
No. I wish I could have your pumpkin pie because pumpkin pie is my favorite.
I have a very good pumpkin pie recipe that I inherited from my mother. It's actually the old Joy of Cooking recipe with some key adaptations. And I'll tell you the secret ingredient. It's that there is no pumpkin in it. It's made out of butternut squash.
What?
Yeah.
That's like sacrilege. I don't know.
Oh, no, you're like, I don't know about that, Malia, but I'm telling you, that is a really good pumpkin pie. It is really good. It's better than pumpkin, truly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I feel like that's a good way to close.
All right, so we're going to drop a link here about Thanksgiving and the Thanksgiving spirit from our nerdy girl in spirit, Dr. Laura Froyen, who does the Balanced Parent podcast. And Ashley Ritter and I did a podcast interview with her, and she's just released this. It's about having healthy and balanced holidays, and especially about doing that as a parent of young children. And it was a really lovely interview. We had a really good time doing the interview. So we're going to drop the link to we're going to drop the link to that podcast. I'm seeing in the comments that everybody wants the pie recipe. Okay,
I was thinking the same thing, Malia. I was like, you're not getting away with not sharing that pie recipe.
Okay, I had already planned my post for this week is how do we celebrate Thanksgiving safely? And I will include the pie recipe, okay? Everybody can have my mom's pie recipe. She would be delighted for that to happen. Okay.
Data, evidence, and pie. That is right. What the nerdy girls have to offer.
I think that's actually pretty in keeping with our
brand.
Yeah. Okay. So that's all we have time for today. It's already been half an hour. Thanks for hanging out with us. We will see you next week for more Q&A. I think next week I'm going to have, instead of Lindsay, I think we're going to be talking to family physician Dr. Sarah Coles, who is one of the nerdy girls, and we're going to be taking some more clinical questions. So if you have a question, please go put it in the question box. It's on our website at dearpandemic.org. And in the meantime, please stay safe and stay sane.